to the official podcast of DogsDaily.com, a Sports Illustrated channel.
Gets to the edge. Sonny Michel will send the Dogs home to the championship game.
If you're looking for the latest Georgia Bulldog news in football, basketball, baseball, and recruiting, then you're in the right place.
Anthony Edwards hit the jam. Are you kidding me?
Hosted by Dogs Daily writers Jeremiah Stoddard, Kyle Funderburk, and Jonathan Williams.
Here's a pitch. Hit high out into right center with some carry. It's got a chance. This ball is out of here. Tucker Bradley has won it.
Just sit back, relax, and prepare yourself for these hot takes you're about to listen to.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Classic City Sports. As always, Jeremiah Stoddard along with my buddy Jonathan Williams here. We're excited to have another good episode for you. As you can see the title of it, it's about roster management and other things of that nature, but always got to touch on several different things throughout the episode. So today's focus, we're going to talk about different roster management things, recruiting stuff coming up a little bit here in the next week, actually. We were just talking about that. Next Wednesday is National Signing Day. We're not going to get too in-depth of all of that just yet. We'll wait until we see how cards fall there and kind of jump into all of that at that time. But then we also want to talk about, we saw something come out this week about the way too early SEC schedule, results of what they think is going to happen this next year. So we're going to kind of talk about that a little bit based on what we saw this past year and just kind of go from there. But Jonathan, how are you feeling so far about the offseason and what Kirby's got cooking?
Off season's already kind of off to a drag, especially kind of as a student, because what you usually try and do is you kind of transition into other sports you have interest in, especially me, growing up just super passionate about basketball, but we all know that Georgia basketball is at an all-time low right now. Although I did go to the game yesterday, and it was far and away the best game that they played all year, and you beat Alabama. So absolutely capped off an entire great season for Georgia and Alabama. And ironic enough, they won by 6, and then Georgia sealed it off in the national championship with a pick 6. So it was just it's always a great time to be in Athens than to be Alabama. So, but I mean, in regards to football, though, it's kind of just been a lull because nothing like flashy has happened for Georgia. You've had some guys depart. You've had some guys declare for the NFL draft and everything. But you haven't really seen Kirby make like the big hire that he usually has yet. I'm sure that is to come because there are some positions that need to be filled on the coaching staff. And then, like he always is, he'll dip in the portal somewhere and he'll get himself an immediate impact player like he always – every season, every offseason he has done that. So there's no question that he'll do that. It's just a matter of when now. So, but other than that, just not a whole lot going on. Just listening to the offseason talk. Like we say, it's talking season, so that's, of course, begun. But – just enjoying the offseason a little bit, of course, as well, though.
Yeah, we need to get that segment going again. Yeah. We didn't have that prepared for this week, but maybe starting, in the next episode, we'll get that going again. So one of our favorite things to do during the offseason is a segment called Talking Season or Talking Season. So what we do is we just go out and find, which right now there's a ton of this to look at. No rival fans on Twitter especially or any social media platform, just the comments that they make because it's honestly we sit back and laugh at some of them. Some of the ones from last season just killed me. They're so inaccurate and they don't pay attention to anything.
It would really be interesting to go back and look at the ones we read from last offseason and see how they pertain to last season. Because I'm sure a lot of them kind of fell through last season, especially ones that talked about development. Kirby has all these 5 stars in the national championships. So it would be interesting to go through all of those and see.
I feel like that was the most commented thing.
Oh yeah, by
was
far.
Like the lack of development, the mismanagement of quarterbacks.
So this season, this offseason, we'll get to see the new ones that develop about what people are saying about Kirby Smart now. Because there's not a whole lot you can say right now, but I'm sure someone will think of something to say.
Yeah. But anyways, with that, what we like is for fans or people watching and stuff to just send us those same comments. If you find them, send us a DM on Twitter.
Oh yeah.
And then just let us know what you find, or if you know us personally, text us or something like that, and just help us kind of build that segment. But we will get to that probably next week or so as definitely. Well. But like you said as well, it's kind of, a lull for football outside of there's been some big news with players leaving more. draft declarations, that kind of thing. Jermaine Burton deciding to go to Alabama, which we'll touch base with that a little bit down the road. But yeah, then that leaves you with other sports, but basketball is not exciting right now. We will get into some of that kind of stuff as well. Baseball season's almost here.
It is.
That starts in February.
24 days away, I believe it is.
Yeah, mid-February.
They came in their preseason ranked number 16, so they should be pretty good this year. So that should be kind of fun to keep in track. And
baseball has so many different ranking systems.
Yeah,
I've seen. There's literally like
perfect
6
game,
or 7.
AP, all kinds of stuff. It's kind of hard to keep up with.
But I know I saw one that they came in at 14.
Yeah, I think
like
Baseball
the
America official one or whatever it is,
16.
Yeah.
So yeah. Well, anyways, we'll jump right into the rest of the stuff then. Let's start with, just before we get into the meat of everything else, let's start with I'll pull it up again and just look at the predictions for how everybody's going to kind of play out in the regular season next year. And we'll start with the West, right? So go ahead and just start with the West for me if you don't mind.
Okay, so this is by 247. This is the way too early SEC record projections for the entire SEC. So they got both the West side and the East side. They have Alabama going 12-0, Texas A&M finishing second, 10-2, LSU finishing third, 9-3, Ole Miss finishing fourth, 8-4, Arkansas finishing fifth, 7-5, Mississippi State finishing sixth, 7-5 as well, and then Auburn finishing dead last at 5-7. So that's kind of the rundown they have for the SEC West right now. Honestly, I don't have too many complaints with that list, other than I think Arkansas is going to be better than what people are. Than that. I think they'll be better than 7-5. I do know that they lose Treylon Burks, which was a huge part of their offense, number one wide receiver, potentially probably going to be a first-round pick in the NFL draft. But Sam Pittman's gotten a lot of good players out of the portal, one of them being Latavius Burnett from Georgia. And then also he added Jaden Hazelwood from Oklahoma, so maybe he can kind of help fill the void of replacing a Treylon Burks. But other than that, they still return a lot of good starters. Pittman's done a great job building a roster, and it looks like he has. They improve each and every season. So right. I would expect them to kind of take another step forward. This would, of course, have them kind of taking a step back in a sense. But other than that, I would say it's a pretty solid list.
Yeah, I would agree. And the only thing that I would say that I would see kind of shift a little bit in this is with just kind of the 3 middle teams, right? So like LSU, Ole Miss, and Arkansas, they're all within just a couple of games anyways. I think, from 9-3 down to like 7-6, all positive records and stuff like that. But I could see that kind of shift around some.
Yeah.
In that general, I think you're going to have your Alabama, your Texas A&M towards the top there. That's going to be fine. But I could very well see those middle teams shift. I'm not surprised to see Mississippi State and Auburn down low, especially Auburn's going to be pretty pitiful next year. Yeah, Auburn, I don't expect a lot from them, so I'm not surprised to see that as well. But yeah, with Ole Miss and Arkansas, I think either one of those teams could easily finish ahead of LSU.
Yeah.
LSU's had some turnover in quarterback position and stuff. Max Johnson's transferring out this year too. So they've got some uncertainty with positions and stuff like that. So we'll be, keeping a close eye on to it. When we get closer to the season, like right before the season, like we did this last year, we'll go through the whole schedule. We'll look at game by game for these teams, and we'll come every team. And we'll come up with our exact predictions of how that's going to play out, which we should pull that back up.
We did pretty solid. I actually took a look back at it after the national championship. I mean, we pretty much nailed the SEC East as a whole. We had Kentucky finishing second. The only team we really missed out on in the East was Tennessee. They did a lot better than what we expected.
Everybody. Yeah,
but we predicted Florida to a T. Like I think we got their season down
until the end of the season. Every single unraveled even further.
Unraveled. I mean,
but the first 4 losses we called all 4 of their first 4 losses.
4 of them, and then with the West, the
West kind of shook us up. Especially we did predict Arkansas to get 6-6, didn't we? Bowl eligible.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know.
They got close.
We'll definitely have to look back at that sometime soon.
We'll go back. We'll take back on that in the next couple of weeks, maybe, as things kind of slow down in different areas. So we will we'll check that out. But let's go to the East. I'm going to go backwards on this one. I'm going to start from the bottom and going up. Obviously, you expect Vanderbilt to be at the bottom of this list, which they have them going 3-9, which 3 wins for Vanderbilt. That's pretty solid.
Get out the balloons.
That's pretty solid.
That's celebration stuff right
that's
there.
That's solid. Missouri you got at 4-8, which I think that's fair.
Yeah.
Florida at 6-6. That's about fair as well. South Carolina 7-5. I think that's the team that's jumping a little bit more. With Rattler coming in, and
I
there's a
think
lot
they
of
take
moves
that jump,
there.
yeah.
So I think they could be around that area is expected. Tennessee 8-4, Kentucky 8-4, Georgia 12-0. So I'd say, I mean, Kentucky might do a little bit better than 8-4. I think they could win an extra game there.
Yeah.
I think their ceiling is probably 10 wins. We haven't broken down their entire schedule, obviously, but I would expect to see them to be around that 9-10 win season kind of thing. 8 would be probably my low for them.
I could I definitely see South Carolina taking a step forward this year. I thought South Carolina last season was they kind of surprised me a little bit. It seemed like the players really bought into what Shane Beamer was preaching over there, and then of course they got Spencer Rattler out of the portal, which I mean he wasn't all that impressive at Oklahoma and was kind of disappointing there, but still he's a really talented guy, and if he can buy into what Shane Beamer's telling his players, I think that he could find some success there. Maybe a change of scenery will be good for him. And then they also brought in a tight end from Oklahoma as well, who knows Rattler. So you kind of already got a good connection there. So I think that they will definitely take a step forward. I think Tennessee could also do better than what do they have them at 8-4? I think Tennessee could definitely do better than 8-4. They were another team that kind of surprised us this last season with the offense that they ran. So
they did.
I think they could definitely be better than 8-4. I think they could give Kentucky a run for their money, finishing second in the East. But I mean, of course, they have Georgia finishing 12-0. I think that's very possible.
I already looked at that schedule too, and I didn't see a loss on that regular season. No matter, even if Stetson Bennett comes in as quarterback, starts like we kind of think that he will at this point potentially. Just the way things played out this year, even with all the defensive guys go into the draft and stuff like that, they're still returning 5 different guys. And I think the defense might have a slight drop off, but they're going to still be very steady. And if that's the case, this team, there was nobody on the regular season schedule that, in my opinion, was going to beat them.
Yeah. Plus, I mean, your 2 teams that you're playing from the West are the bottom 2 in this projection from these projections from 247, which is Mississippi State and Auburn.
They did get Mississippi State.
So not really you're not really facing a gauntlet there either. And then I still just don't think the East is back yet necessarily as a whole. I mean, of course, you're going to have Georgia. And then maybe like Kentucky or Tennessee or someone like that can kind of be like hovering around the top 20 mark by the end of the season. But as a whole, I mean, it's not competitive yet. There's just too many holes on the other teams kind of still figuring things out. Florida's starting fresh for the most part.
Florida, they're at 6-6, and I think that's
pretty fair for them.
Yeah, there's too much uncertainty with what they've got going on at that program right now.
The roster's going to struggle early on. I think it's going to take them a couple of years to kind of get back to where they want to be.
Well, there is some buzz with Napier right now as far as being able to gain some recruiting momentum in the early parts of it. But it's
got 50 coaches, so you ought to be able to get kids, I guess.
You should, and especially being down in the state of Florida, they should be able to get some
with
stuff
the game-changing coordinator, this new invention, I guess, that Napier has discovered. Maybe that'll get some momentum going for them, I guess. I don't know. Obviously, he knows something that we don't, maybe. So, but I think overall both of those lists are pretty fair. I think they're they're a good gauge of how I also think the East and West will shake up for the SEC. But
I think the biggest surprise on the list for me, which isn't even like a surprise, meaning I don't think it's realistic. Yeah. But the biggest surprise is just seeing that Tennessee could be in that top 3 of the SEC East after, think about going into last season. Last season, I think we had them, we had winning 2 to 3 games. I
think it's 4 or 5. Yeah.
We had them. It was very low.
The bottom.
Maybe about 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Under 500, I'm pretty sure we had them as far as what their win percentage would be.
Mm-hmm.
But that was because of how much they unloaded.
Yeah.
The year before they lost like 20 people. It just through the transfer portal and all kinds of stuff, just people just completely cleaning house after all the stuff that they had. So the fact that they came out and ran that big of an offense, mid-season to really carry it through the rest of the season was very surprising. So I'm not surprised to see them at this point, projected to do that. But I am surprised to see them being able to turn it around as fast as they have, considering them having to rebuild that program basically after everything that happened there.
Mm-hmm.
So that was probably my biggest surprise on that list, but something that also should be expected at this point.
Yeah.
I think the good thing that we're seeing is some of these SEC East teams are starting to build up to be a little bit more respectable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you got Kentucky being consistent at this point. Now, I'm not saying Kentucky's this incredible team because we all saw how things played out last year. They got a lot of hype early on, and then they had to go through the buzzsaw of Georgia, which makes a big difference. So Shout out to my nephew and my niece Jonah and Emma that are watching right now. I just saw a comment come through from him, made me laugh a little bit. So appreciate you guys for watching as well. But yeah, that's something that kind of stood out to me, that the East is starting to build a little bit more strength on their side. You expect them to start to hopefully sustain it, right?
Yeah.
Like the biggest talk for so many years is the SEC West is so stacked, but then you've got the SEC East that hasn't been holding its own. And in reality, I don't think the SEC West is stacked right now in general. You have Texas A&M who's competing, but they seem to fall off. They have figured out how to kind of go toe-to-toe with Alabama, but then they lose other games they shouldn't be losing at all. And so they can't quite get their stuff figured out to be consistent as far as a top competitor goes. Yeah. But you never know. They do have the highest rated recruiting class in history, right, this year.
Yeah.
So that takes a couple years to manifest. So keep that in mind. I know some people have said what they should be able to do after this year with the recruiting class, but these guys are all freshmen. Yeah. Some of these guys won't be on the field.
I guess all these 5 stars with no national championships now turns to Texas A&M, because now I think they have the most 5 stars out of everybody in this class. So I guess all the hate that was towards Georgia is now shifted towards Texas A&M. At least I would figure that's how that works now.
Well, that's where from if you watch the SEC shorts, that's where Hope went.
Yeah,
Hope moved out of Georgia's house and went to go stay with Texas A&M. Yeah. So they get to carry that burden for now. Yeah. But yeah, I think that's fair. They're the ones that have the past few years, they're building up that talent base, right? Their roster's getting bigger and stronger. So you expect them to start to make it, it all connect at some point in the next couple of years.
Yeah, and the good thing for Texas A&M is that you had to think you beat Alabama last year, and not even with your best roster or your best players out on the field. You had Zach Calzada, your backup quarterback, coming into the season, who went in there and beat Alabama as well. So that kind of gives you some hope, is if you are at full strength, maybe every single year you can compete with Alabama, because you're not going to win the West if you can't beat Alabama at this point, especially with Nick Saban there. So that's kind of a good thing for them to keep looking forward to, is that you kind of saw where you're headed in the right direction last year. You just didn't have some things go your way as far as off the field with injuries and whatnot. So if they can stay healthy, perhaps they can dethrone Alabama. I don't know if they will this next year, because Alabama, they are looking pretty stacked coming into this next season. They're the favorites to win the national championship for a reason. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, they should be. They should be up in that conversation. The problem with it is, this is the thing that's going to roll into, and you can't pay attention to preseason rankings and stuff like that, or especially way too early ones,
especially
where we're at this
January.
Point. You don't know how these rosters, National Signing Day is not over. But the biggest thing on that is not even National Signing Day; it's the transfer portal. Yeah. That's an open-ended thing. That can happen at any point in time. So you can go into July and think that there's a deficiency on the roster, and all of a sudden Kirby Smart goes out and picks up 2 key players at that position.
Well, yeah, Darian Kendrick didn't come until June last year, and especially there's going to be a lot of people that are going to hit the portal, I would presume, after spring practice. Spring practice, you kind of get an idea of where you are on the depth chart going into this season. You kind of get a feel for who you're competing with, if they're outperforming you. And those are where those discussions happen of hey, this is where you currently sit right now. So unless you make some things happen, that's probably where you're going to be headed into the season, or bearing any injury.
That's a very good point.
And so that's where you're also going to see some more roster movement. They're like, all right, well, if it's not here, then I guess I'm going to go somewhere else. So also have to look out for that. The transfer portal is just going to continue to get even add more players.
It's going to be more intense. So expect this end of April, right?
Yeah.
So it's G-Day is usually the third week of April, somewhere around that, the third Saturday of April. But just prepare for the end of this April to be probably the craziest off season,
especially now that you got
the beginning
loads
of it.
Money into play.
That's what I was going to say. This is the first time that we're seeing NIL really be a factor for that time period, because in the past year it really kicked off. July 1st was when the NIL stuff was official. Across the board. I think it was July 1st is when it was, or just sometime July. And at that point, it opened up that whole realm of it. And at this point, we've seen how the offseason started with that. But you got a very good point, because you got players on Georgia's roster that you're waiting to see, how it plays out this spring, to see what they're going to do. As of now, you have Stetson Bennett coming back, and you've got JT Daniels transferring out, but he's in the portal. He hasn't officially, he can't leave until the spring, right? Yeah. So that's a big name that once the spring semester ends and he graduates technically, so it'll be May. At that point is when you're going to see players like him announce where they're going.
And that could influence other players to go with him as well. I mean, you got to think guys that are on Georgia's roster, and this is just hypothetically speaking,
right.
But you have to at least consider that if they see JT Daniels go somewhere and you got a guy that's maybe third or fourth on the depth chart and they had a really good connection with JT, maybe they see an opportunity to follow him, go get some immediate playing time with a guy that they're comfortable with. So you also have to factor that in as well. We don't even know where Caleb Williams is going yet, so that could draw in some guys wherever he goes. So there's just still a lot to play out with the transfer portal.
Yeah, exactly. And it's going to be one, like, think about, there's a couple players on Georgia's roster that, people have been concerned about leaving potentially, right?
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of speculation. One name that's come up a ton, and I think there's real smoke behind it. You just don't really know how it's going to go. And that's with Darnell Washington, right? Like, there's been so much speculation about him. Now, as of now, he's still at UGA, and he's still, actually, I saw him in person the other day, just ran into him just a couple days ago, and I texted Jonathan about it. So he's here still. I know that.
He's around
but
Athens.
He's around Athens, yeah. So you never know what's going to happen. But think about players like him, right? We'll use him as an example because right now he's still there, and maybe he went in and he talked to the coaches and he said, I'm giving you this spring to show me how you're going to use me and make sure that my goals still align with how you plan to go about everything this year.
Yeah. It's all about putting words into action at that point.
Like, and giving them the chance to prove what they're saying, right? Because it's really easy for these coaches and everybody to say, hey, if you stay, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to use you. But it's another thing to see them actually implement it in the spring practices and into the game plan, going through scrimmages and stuff, to see that usage and show, basically for them to also be able to show those coaches they can be used that way. And when I say that, I am talking about like a Darnell Washington, because the biggest thing for him is, the amount of targets that he saw a true freshman take from him when he wants to be used in that type of manner, right? The only issue with that is in my opinion, they're two different types of tight ends.
Yeah, I mean, it's even hard to classify Brock as a tight end. I mean, he's
out here running
he's a Swiss Army knife is what he is. Yeah. Anything you want him to do, he can do it, and he does it exceptionally well, whereas Darnell is not that. Darnell is not a guy that you can just pretty much plug in anywhere on the field and he can make a play for you. He's a guy that belongs at the end of the line. He should be blocking for you, and then he can extend the passing game from there as well, which he is valuable in the passing game. He's a massive target, and he showed promise in that area. So you can't blame the guy for wanting more targets because he's proven that, hey, if you get the ball to me, I'll make some good things happen for you. But then again, when you got a guy like Brock Bowers, who is basically anytime touches a ball is good for a 20-yard gain or a touchdown, I mean, it's hard to take away targets from him. And then also
they design the plays up for him more too, like that are directly he's the primary read for a good reason. Yeah,
absolutely. So yeah, just a lot to shake out for spring and whatnot. So we'll just have to keep track of that as it moves on. Off season stays busy now. There's just never a dead period. Usually like a few years ago, it would be a dead period after National Signing Day in a week or so. But now with the transfer portal, I mean, it's just ongoing. I mean, that's why Kirby Smart talked about it in his post-national championship interview where he was like, we work minus 7 days of the year. We work every single day of the year because it never stops. You're always having to talk to recruits. You're always having to check in on players. You're always having to look into the portal, all this and that. Like, it is a grind to be in college football. And he said that you better love it because, I mean, it takes every single second of your time to be any type of coach, analyst, whatever at the collegiate level right now. So it's going to continue to get busy. It's going to stay crazy, and it's at least good for us because I guess that produces more content.
Yeah, it definitely can be good.
We don't have stress about it, at least.
That's I don't have to worry about like trying to convince these kids to go, which is where we get into like the title of it, where it's roster management is so important at this point, more than like ever before. Like you said, these coaches can't ever take breaks anymore. No. Like they don't have time to sit back and just go, you know what, we have a lull for the next 2 months or so. Our players are here. We're finished up with National Signing Day. We're looking to next year as far as the recruiting process goes, because that part never really stops. But that's kind of low key. There's a certain number of guys there looking at their official visits, all that kind of stuff there. Mm-hmm. They plan that stuff out a little bit more. One thing that's something they can't really plan for anymore is just having an upset player just walk in and say, hey, I'm about to put my name in. I want to leave.
Or vice versa. A player from another team enters a portal, and you immediately got to hop on that if he's someone that you're interested in because he's available to every single college in America all of a sudden. So you better get in there early if you're serious about getting him on your roster. So it's just like at any moment. I mean, think about when JT Daniels came to Georgia. It was like out of nowhere. It was like all of a sudden the news broke that JT Daniels was coming to Georgia, and really nobody was expecting it. And so you never know when that type of thing can happen again, when someone can just enter the portal and all of a sudden you're like, that's a guy that we need on our roster. We got to go get in there as soon as we possibly can, get him on a campus or whatnot, go to him, travel, like wherever that is, wherever that player is. Lane Kiffin, day after JT Daniels and Jermaine Burton hit the portal, he was already in Athens talking to them, trying to get them to come to Ole Miss. So it's stuff like that. You just never know. Like at the drop of a hat, you may have to get on an airplane and go head out to Texas, California, wherever, depending on where the player is. So it's just madness with the transfer portal. It's ridiculous at where we are at the stage of college football. But I think bringing out roster management brings up the segment that I told you about. And
somewhat. So Jonathan has decided. He texted me this yesterday, and he said together this segment that he told me it was about recruiting stuff, but I don't know what it is. He just kind of wanted to throw it at me,
into this blind.
So I don't know what's going on.
That's by design because I was actually in the lounge with some guys in the Discord that we're in with Brooks's Patreon and whatnot that we pay for. So I was chopping it up with some of the guys in there. And Wheezy, who which some of our audience will know, the guys that are hanging out in the comment section, they'll know who Wheezy is. He was going down this list of players that decommitted from Georgia ever since Kirby Smart first got to UGA. And he was going down this list, just naming every single player because, as we know, Wheezy, he spends all of his time and effort into recruiting. And so I can never do something like this, but I was like, hey, I want you to send me that list because I think that's great content for our podcast. But I wanted you to have the same reaction, or at least I hope you have the same reaction that I had. And so I'm just going to go down this list of names, and then I want you to kind of keep a tally in your mind of players that like that name, that name registers with you.
Yeah.
There's obviously going to be a few that you'll recognize, but I think you'll be a bit surprised. So 2016, I'm going to butcher this name, but Randrecious Davis, Aaron Dowdle. 2017, Devontae Smith, Tennille Carter, Breon Dixon, Bailey Hawkman, Xavier Jenkins. 2018, Max Ray, Elijah Moore, Caleb Tanner, Aaron Burrell, Javon Beckton, Richard Wild Goose Jr., Donovan Georges. 2019, Jaden Hazelwood, John Emery Jr., Jalen Perry, John Rice Plumley, J.D. Bertrand, Rashad Chaney, Luke Griffin. 2020, Aki Ongjabi. I don't know that one, guys. Oof, that one's a tough one. Joshua Braun, Jamil Burrows, and Corey Wren. And then 2021, Elijah Judy, DeJohn Warren, and then that's it, because the other two recommitted that he put on there, and I'm not going to do the guys that recommitted. So out of all of those, we'll say I think I listed maybe 20 names. How many of those did you know?
3 or 4.
3 or 4. Okay, so 3 or 4 out of somewhat of 20 names.
You're talking. What's that, like 5%?
5%. So what do you think
Less than 5%?
What do you think I'm getting at with this?
The point of it, I see exactly where the point goes. It's like, so these guys are decommitting, but is it by design, right? Like, is it like Kirby and them letting them decommit because they kind of moved on to a different player? There's a few of them that have made names for themselves. I think that's the point, right?
Yeah,
it's like
obviously
the ones that have been notable.
Smith.
Devontae Smith is a big one. Plumlee was another one that stuck out, which I think he's supposed to be. He transferred.
He's at UCF now, but he
just transferred. Yeah. So I know the name because it's it's quarterback.
Yeah,
quarterback. I think that's
played
why,
at Ole
because
Miss
he hasn't really done that much at Ole Miss. Like he didn't start at Ole Miss.
He did
for
the first year that he was there, but then after that,
he lost it to Matt Corral.
Yeah,
and now he's transferring to UCF, which is I did remember that as well. But the reason you know him is because of.
Yeah, he played in the SEC, and you kind of watched him his freshman year, and he was still a name around. He played a good bit of wide receiver actually for Ole Miss as well when Matt Corral took over.
And Devontae Smith is just like
that's won the freaking Heisman. That one, it's just one of those.
But
things.
That's one that also went to Bama. Like you lost him to Bama. You didn't lose him to a lesser team somewhere else. So like it's a very different scenario. So that's so these decommitments. I think that's one thing that we've learned. And being a part of, Brooks's Patreon stuff where he gives his inside information and all that kind of stuff that he does, that's one of the things that he tells us a lot, right? Mm-hmm. When a player decommits, sometimes he'll tell you they started looking somewhere else. It's by design.
Or even he'll just, you kind of hear also, what do we always say with Kirby Smart? At least something that I always say is, just trust Kirby Smart. Because at this point, 6 seasons in, he's won a national championship. You should know by now, Kirby, you can trust Kirby Smart. Anything that happens, whether it's bad news or good news, it's going to end up being for the betterment of the team. And basically what I'm getting at is everybody kind of panics with decommits, of course, especially if it's a 5-star that was kind of on your roster for a little bit. People kind of started panicking when Bear Alexander decommitted. It looked like he was possibly going to go to Texas A&M. Now he wound up back up at UGA, but when recruits kind of start leaving, people are kind of questioning, like, oh my gosh, what's going on? Why are we losing this guy? I feel like he'd be a good fit at UGA. Like, what's going on? But really, after hearing that list, like we said, 4 out of somewhat 20 names you remember, it also tells you that like more times than not, you're not even going to remember that guy. It's not even going to be a player that you're probably even going to really miss out on and also Kirby Smart's probably going to replace that person with someone that you will remember. He's going to bring in someone that's going to fill that void, or what would have been a void if you didn't get that guy. So it all has to do with a nug drop. Look at SSL hooking us up.
Keep talking. I'm gonna pull it up.
Oh, it's a fug. Okay.
Uh-oh.
Hold on 1 minute. Jeremiah's going to read this for us real quick. I'll just keep going on my rant a little bit. But basically, it all has to do with roster management. And Kirby Smart has mastered that, in my opinion. He has mastered managing his roster, whether it be from the transfer portal, being able to fill the voids that he gets from players that do decommit from his program. He's always going to get top-tier commits in recruiting as well. But then also something that his staff has done an exceptional job at is he finds talent in guys that nobody else is really going for. Go back to Eric Stokes. Nobody was really offering that guy a scholarship to come play cornerback at UGA. And because everybody's like, he's a track guy. Like, we don't see a guy like that who's like, doesn't have the build of playing a cornerback in the SEC. 3-star coming out of high school, and Kirby Smart takes him first-round draft pick for last year's draft. And then also you have guys like Ladd McConkey now. That wasn't really a guy that a lot of Power 5 teams were after as well, but he had a huge year for Georgia this year as well.
Was he a 2 or 3-star?
Yeah, I would say 3-star probably.
I think he was a 3-star.
Yeah. So you kind of see that now. It's like, if there's a 3-star coming to UGA, those guys typically tend to pan out.
Well,
a good
think
bit.
about it, and I owe him the apology of this too, because I remember looking back at the recruiting class, and we had issues at wide receiver. Georgia had issues at wide receiver. You start looking at stuff like that, and you go, man, they really didn't go out and get that guy at wide receiver this year, right? Like you sit there and you look at it. In this past year too, the same thing happened in 2021, where they went out and got A.D. Mitchell, who was a 3-star and had an immediate impact on the roster. And all of a sudden, like, those guys make huge jumps forward in like a freshman season. Ladd was a redshirt freshman, but A.D. Mitchell being a true freshman. And it kind of surprises you to see those guys come through, because you're like, oh, they just got a 3-star wide receiver. But then they end up being guys that are, A.D. was 3rd on the list in receiving. Ladd was 2nd on the list in receiving, and wide receivers. I'm excluding Brock Bowers because that doesn't count. He's a tight end, but he also just doesn't count. He almost had a 1,000-yard season this year. So we're excluding him from that. But as far as wide receivers go, you had Jermaine Burton, 497 yards, something like that.
Somewhat around that.
Ladd McConkey was about 50 yards short of that, I think, in the 440 range, somewhere like that. And then A.D. Mitchell was maybe 20 yards or so short of that in like the 420 range, somewhere in that range as far as it. But those being, the guys, Burton, who left, but he's been around, and he kind of was a bigger recruit at wide receiver himself. So he was that expected guy. But the point of that conversation is those 3 stars wide receivers came out and surprised you. You look at it as, man, Kirby's not really going out and getting the big name wide receiver. But what he did is he found a diamond in the rough. He found 2 different 3-star wide receivers and made them incredible, like have an incredible impact on a national championship level team, or a national championship winning team. Along with that freshman huge tight end, Brock Bowers, who was every bit as advertised as what he was supposed to be. Yeah. So when you add all of that in together, and it just really surprises you where those pieces can come from. So you just got to trust that when that 3-star comes in, that they know what they're doing.
Well, Jordan Davis was a 3-star.
He was.
And he's
like a top 10 draft pick now.
He was recruited back when Georgia was still struggling with the defensive line. That was a struggle for Jordan Davis or having a mind blank, but Jordan Davis is probably going to be the first Georgia defensive lineman taken in the draft since 2013, I believe. That's how long it's been for UJ to have a defensive lineman taken in the draft. So they're kind of getting the ball rolling there, and it got rolling because of a 3-star recruit. Think back to Tay Crowder. He was a 3-star running back coming out of high school, and he turned
converted linebacker.
And now he's starting in the NFL for the New York Giants, and he's putting up pretty good numbers for them as well.
Let's just talk about that, because that's an important detail to me in this whole conversation of it for 2 reasons. Tay Crowder, you gotta give him a shout out on this, because one, he was converted from a 3-star wide or running back to a starting linebacker in the SEC, but then he made the draft. He was Mr. Irrelevant in the draft, so he barely got drafted. He barely got drafted, right? But it makes an immediate impact on the roster. And he might have been SSL.
I know some people had him as a 2-star.
I think he might have.
You
might be right. I think he was a 2-star running back. Actually,
I think some had 2 and some had 3. But yeah, he was. I know for a fact he also was a 2-star.
But that just makes it even bigger, right? Like he turned a 2-star running back into a starting linebacker that got drafted as Mr. Ravella in the last pick of the draft, but now is starting on an NFL roster and making a huge impact with them. If you watch a Giants game, you're gonna hear his name get called. Yep. You know, not everybody's watching that many Giants games, but if you do, it just because you'll see him and you will see his name called because he's making an impact. That's development, and that's where you see these diamonds in the rough come out and shine. I know
it's a touchy subject, but he also turned a walk-on quarterback into a national champion. I'm just going to put that out there.
He turned. Had
the third best
right?
QBR in college football this year, most efficient passer on 20+ yards or more. I mean,
you can say what you want. You can say what you want about him, but honestly, he turned a walk-on quarterback, a former walk-on quarterback, into a guy that.
And the fourth quarter won you the national championship. Put the offense on his back and said, let's go win
a season. And I had this argument with somebody the other day. They didn't realize this when I said it. And so then they looked it up. And I was like, you can look it up. I already did. I promise you I know the answer to this. But he statistically outperformed Jake Fromm in any of his 3 seasons. He did. He had more passing yards in this season than Fromm had in any of his 3. He did tie him in the other 2 statistics, though. He had 30 touchdown passes and 7 interceptions, which was Jake Fromm's best year, but he had more passing yards in that as well. And I know I'm not getting into that debate on everything with Jake Fromm. I know a lot of fans aren't that big of fans of his anymore, but you got to think that guy came out of high school as a 5-star recruit.
Or 4-star. He was 4-star.
5 by some and 4 by others. I think technically he's a 4-star.
Yeah, I think by the time he was at UJ, he was a 4-star.
He was a 5-star when he was an Alabama recruit. Yeah, he dropped to a 4-star.
Yeah,
he dropped to a 4-star when he went to Georgia. But you get my point. That quarterback performed as high as a quarterback that was a 4 or 5-star quarterback that was wanted by Georgia, Alabama, all that kind of stuff. Stetson Bennett didn't have an offer from an SEC school. And then he also walked on, then transferred to a junior college and came back. And Kirby and them wanted him back. They understood that him leaving was for him to get more experience and be able to be, they wanted him back when he came back. Yeah. So you got to think about that development and where those star guys can come from, like the star performers can come from. I think a lot of fans pay way too much attention to the stars. I think in recruiting processes and stuff like that.
I think I got Kyle Funderburk, who used to be on here with us, but isn't anymore. I think he has the best definition of what stars are. He always has said that stars represent how many Power 5 offers a kid has.
Essentially, yeah.
So if a guy has every single Power 5 offer like in the book, like he's probably going to be on the upward end of a 4-star, 5-star. And then if you're a guy like Eric Stokes or Ladd McConkey, who maybe has a few Power 5, like maybe he has an offer from Memphis, offer from UGA, and then maybe like a South Carolina and a Vanderbilt or something like that, it's probably going to be on the end of a 3-star. So I think that's the best definition I've really heard of what star ratings actually are, because at the end of the day, stars do not matter anything. We've seen plenty of 5-stars that don't pan out. We've seen plenty of 3-stars that do pan out and play way above and beyond the limitations that people set on them. And so I think people do really get caught up in stars way too much, especially when it comes to quarterbacks, because as soon as a guy walks in on the campus as a 5-star rating, Gatorade Player of the Year, #1 quarterback in the nation, broke all these records in high school, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, this is the guy that needs to be playing immediately, like blah blah blah, 1st-round pick, he's an elite guy, he's already better than the guy we have, just based on what he did in high school, and because he has this fancy 5-star rating and the guy we have now is a 3-star. And that's logically how that works, is that 5-star automatically means that you're better than the guy that's playing right now. So I think people do pay way too much attention to stars. And especially, like we've just said, how Kirby Smart has proven that stars do not matter, because he's
a 2-star
developed
running back turned into an NFL linebacker.
He's developed talent all across the board, no matter what your rating is. So yeah, when it comes to recruiting, don't pay attention to stars. All you should know is that if Kirby Smart wants him, he's a legit player and he's someone that's going to benefit your roster. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. And you got to just trust the process. As everyone hates to hear, just trust Kirby. Everybody wants to feel like they have more of an impact.
Everybody hates patience.
Everyone hates patience. That's very true. But they always want to question the decisions of it. When I get it, it's easy. Like, these guys are put on a pedestal in a public view where they can't hide from it. They're going to have everybody criticizing every waking moment of their life, basically, at this point, especially when it comes to coaching. So you expect people to have comments on it, but at the same time, you got to understand at this point, especially at this point, Kirby Smart's proven that he knows what he's doing. He won a national title for the first time at Georgia in 41 years. So at this point, it should be a little easier for you to sit back and just go, you know what? Kirby Smart knows what he's doing. So if he's going with this guy over the other one, I'm going to trust that's the case. And, because you don't know, I don't know, we don't know what happens in practice. We're not going to know what happens. We'll see some scrimmage stuff. We'll see G-Day, but we'll see what they want us to see at G-Day.
Yeah. When they open the scrimmages up, like aside from G-Day, when they open up the scrimmages to the media, what is it generally opened up for? Maybe you get to see one series of maybe 5 plays, but for the most part, it's guys stretching, warming up, and stuff like that. So, the access to the team, especially during the offseason, is very limited. So even then, you have no idea what goes on behind closed doors or anything like that. And we try to, I know we say that a lot on here, but we just want to let you guys know, it's nothing. Don't worry about what happens behind closed doors. There's no need to worry about that because, one, you're not going to get access to it. You're not going to get the answers that you want. That was obvious with the quarterback situation pretty much up until the college football playoff. We never got the answers people never got the answers that they wanted at the quarterback position in regards to why Stetson Bennett starting, because Kirby Smart and them were not going to tell you. They're not going to give you those answers. They're just going to tell you, like you said all season, we're going to play the guy that gives us the best chance to win, kind of leaving out the opportunity that maybe JT Daniels could come out there. Maybe he is going to start that coming Saturday or not. But Kirby Smart keeps secrets to his program for the most part, and he keeps it pretty tight, or keeps information pretty close to the vest for a good reason. And so just kind of keep that in mind going into offseason, that you're probably going to have a lot of questions in regards to things. Like you already have questions about why is Jermaine Burton leaving and stuff like that. But in reality, you're not going to get the answers that you want probably. You're never going to get your answers. So just don't worry about it is all I have to say. Just don't let that stress out or anything.
And that's a good point here by SSL. I'll put this on the screen real quick. And this is including sacks, he said. So Stetson Bennett had the first 150-yard rushing season for a quarterback since Aaron Murray in 2013, which means he's making a big impact on with his legs. And he said that includes sacks. So they take yardage away for sacks and stuff like that.
I think he had minus 26 in the national championship. So, just to kind of,
so
that doesn't include all the other games that he played in as well. So to have 150 plus on the season, wow, I did not know that. So thanks for bringing that up, SSL.
Well, I knew it was somewhere in that range he had. I didn't know that he was the first one since Aaron Murray, which doesn't surprise me because thinking about the list of quarterbacks we've had since Aaron Murray.
Jake Fromm ain't rushing for 150
He wasn't rushing
yards.
For that.
Jacob Eason sure as heck wasn't.
No, Jacob Eason, I love the guy, and I'm glad he is doing what he's doing. He's playing with the Colts. He's a backup with the Colts right now.
I think he's with the Seahawks now.
Did they trade him?
He got cut.
Did he?
Yeah, he got cut. He's with the Seahawks now.
Okay, well, good luck for him on his career and stuff. But he looked like a deer that was first learning how to walk sometimes in the pocket because he's so long and lanky. Like his legs just look lanky. And so he wasn't a mobile guy. You didn't expect him to do it.
He looked like a guy that really hadn't grown into his body yet almost. He just had
just
all
these
guy. Just dripping with tools and everything, but he didn't really know how to use them. It was 5-yard out route or whatever. Oh, I'm throwing 100 miles per hour just because I can. Didn't know how to kind of dial it back at times.
He would do that so much. He would just throw because he had one power. He was just full speed on that.
He's like, well, I got this God-gifted talent, so I guess I might as well use it.
But it's a quick slant that's the receiver's 7 yards in front of you. You got to give him a little bit of touch to catch it. But yeah, he just wasn't a mobile guy. Hudson Mason definitely wasn't a mobile guy his year. The closest guy, Bryce Ramsey, he still didn't even. But he didn't really play.
He was too busy punting.
Yeah, he was the punter. I forgot about that too. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's a great stat.
I think Fatten Bada was actually listed as a dual threat as well.
He was supposed to be a dual threat, but he played that one game against Florida.
He started against Florida.
He started that one game against Florida.
That did not last long.
That didn't go well either.
No.
But I think that's a great point of what type of dynamic that Stetson adds that we haven't had or Georgia hasn't had at quarterback this.
And I think it goes undervalued just because it doesn't look the way that you would want it to. Like when Stetson rushed for that touchdown against Tennessee, it doesn't look the typical way of what a traditional dual threat athlete would look like. He kind of looks a little awkward, kind of trying to make guys miss and whatnot. And he doesn't exactly – I don't think his speed really shows. His true speed doesn't really show on the actual field compared to everybody else. But I think they said that he's clocked in at 21 miles per hour before at practice. So he has
fast.
speed and he is quick.
Yeah.
So I think his speed and his elusiveness in the pocket is just undervalued just because it comes from a guy that's 5'11", a little bit scrawny looking compared to everybody else.
Two things on this. First of all, he's not too short to be a quarterback because everyone saw him stand next to Bryce Young.
So much.
He stood right. I think he's taller than Bryce Young. At minimum, they're the same height. At minimum, they're the same height. So don't bring that in. You've got the quarterback that just won the Heisman, who is short and out here just balling out. So he's not too short to play quarterback.
I think that's a lazy argument.
It's an extremely lazy argument. But that's just part of what people like to use against him as perspective. But the mobility, the kid's not afraid to take a hit either.
Oh,
like when he runs,
nailed during the national championship,
he did
a good amount of
a few times. But my main thing on that is that's part of why he can scramble the way he can and stuff, because he sometimes he's about looking like he's looking for contact. Mm-hmm. Like he's looking like he's ready to drop a shoulder to somebody else.
Oh,
You're not going to find that many quarterbacks that are willing to do that. And I think Stetson's the type of guy that's willing to lay it all on the line kind of thing on every single
and
play.
One that you're comfortable with taking that contact and like initiating it as well, because I mean, he did have some issues with ball security at some times this season, but for the most part, you were fine with Stetson Bennett taking off and not just sliding or taking the knee or whatever, or just giving himself up. You were fine with him finishing it out and getting every yard that he could, because he's just gutsy. The dude's a baller, and he wants to make sure that he can get everything and every yard that he can every single play.
And I think the other side that people don't want to pay attention to as well was part of the reason Stetson was such a good option for Georgia this year, outside of all the other potential things, was the fact that Georgia had such an issue at interior offensive line this year. Mm-hmm. And when you've got a right guard that is like a swinging door over here sometimes, about drives you nuts. Well, sometimes at times, like he would have flashes of playing amazing, and then he would have times where it just looked like I don't know what he was doing. Like he just seemed confused, just make the wrong reads and all kinds of stuff. So, but my point of it wasn't to take a shot at Erickson. It was to basically just say that how many times, just go back and watch a couple games this year, and I guarantee you every game that you watch, you will see at least one play where a guy comes straight down the middle and you see Stetson just immediately roll out to the left or roll out to the right and evade that pressure to either run or at least throw the ball away.
Yeah.
He gets away from it at least once a game.
That
would be a sack. But most games, it was multiple times. That wasn't just a single occurrence.
No doubt.
It happened against Alabama multiple times. And that was a game where until you saw Sawyer, when Sawyer moved over to right guard and they brought Broderick in at left tackle, all of a sudden that pocket was a little bit sturdier. Yeah. And it was incredible to see that interior line was a huge problem this season.
Oh, yeah.
That's where Stetson being able to run and, like you said, being clocked at like 21 miles an hour practice, having that type of speed is extremely helpful. Like, it's astronomical how much of a benefit that is for you when you're in a situation like that. And then, so you got to add those yards on top. I believe combined, he combined for over 3,000 yards of total offense between those rushing stats and his passing stats. So
according to SSL, he would. The stat that he just put in the chat, he would have eclipsed 3,000 total yards.
Yeah. Okay, yeah.
But that is very interesting, the fact that he said in the comment section, for those that are listening to the audio version maybe, he said that first to go over 250 since DJ Shockley in 2005, Stetson had 322, according to Sports Reference. So, and then he follows it with Britton Cox still chasing Stetson's dust.
That was fun. That was a funny play to me. But didn't he have and SSO, you can confirm this if you're on Sports Reference still, he had 2,800 yards passing. So he would have finished with 3,100 yards of total offense, 30 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. Guys, it doesn't get much better than that. It really doesn't get that much better.
Okay.
Oh, Stet had 259.
Gotcha.
I still think the stat, because I think Stetson had 28 something. So even with 259 rushing yards, I think
he maybe just would have barely.
He's definitely over 3,000. Maybe not quite at 31. Mm-hmm. Or maybe close to 3,100 total offensive yards. But that's the point. Like he's very. All right, 2864 or 2862.
Okay, so yeah.
Yep. So he would have been 31 and some change.
We appreciate the help, SSL.
Thank you, SSL, our stat guy, our statistician. But yeah, so you can't go out and ask for and I had a conversation with somebody about this the other day. Unless you're looking for a quarterback to throw or have 4,000 plus yards, Stetson's producing enough. Having a quarterback give you 3,000 yards of total offense should be plenty for you to be able to win big games. And only turning the ball over. I know he had a couple of fumbles But throwing 7 interceptions on 30 touchdowns, that's impressive. And most games he was taken out halfway through.
Yep.
You know, the big blowout games, he played about half the game, didn't start the first game. And like you got to give the kid credit where credit is due. You don't have to love him, but you can't sit here and slander like what he did, like what he was able to accomplish just because it didn't look the way you wanted it to, because he didn't have all of those stars next to his name when he came to UGA, and that you wanted a guy that was behind him that did have those stars to start. You can't sit here and take it out on Stetson because he doesn't deserve that.
I think we're going to have to implement a rule on this podcast where we're not allowed to defend Stetson anymore, because I think we have relayed every possible argument
we're gonna have
for
to let
him.
that one die.
Yeah. And I love talking about it. I really do, because I think it is just unwarranted hate for the guy. But
the reason it keeps coming up is every day I open up the app, the special Twitter app, where everyone has the freedom to say whatever they want. If you're on, UGA Twitter kind of thing where you see all the stuff from fans, you can't help but scroll and see somebody say something about the quarterback stuff, and then see somebody say something negative about Stetson. It almost makes me immediately want to like defend him, because, and I'm not like a super fan in the sense of I think he's the best quarterback ever. I just think he's owed the respect that he's earned at this point, and he's not getting it still. That's the frustrating part. But yes, we do need to let that one lie as a saying. It's almost, other people need to let it lie.
I feel like it's almost getting the point of us talking about Georgia basketball last season. How we were like, this is just getting to be beating a dead horse at this point, because we're like, they're just disappointing. They turn the ball over too much. They can't hit their free throws. They're in it all the way until the end. They can't close it out. And we were saying that
20-0 run every game.
If you avoid all of these things, then you'll be fine. But it just kept happening, and we were saying
and we
the same
sit there
thing.
with that same list of things.
Yeah.
And
we
5 minutes in, we said, all right, well, that one's out.
And I think now we're kind of reaching that point with the Stetson Bennett argument, which, I mean, we won't get into Georgia basketball because we'll just sound like we did last year. But like I said, they did come out with the win last night. But yeah, so all that being said, though, I think we have answered the question for this podcast episode of, has Kirby Smart mastered roster management? I would say he has. 6 years in, I think he definitely has. I think he's done a tremendous job managing it in a totality where he's able to take advantage of the transfer portal. Darian Kendrick is about to be possibly a first-round draft pick now. He landed him from the transfer portal this last year. Tyke Smith coming back this year. We'll finally get to see what he does on the football field for Georgia. So he's filling voids everywhere. He's utilizing every possible aspect that he can. And oh man,
this is good. I'm putting this up. Can't spell Roll Tide without 3 L's.
Love that.
Oh, that's funny.
But yeah, so
didn't the fans start cheering or chanting just like football?
Yeah,
after
they did. It was
I'm sure you got in on that.
Oh yeah, of course they did. I'm a student at UGA. I'm taking it all in, man.
It's a good time.
I mean, it went on like it wasn't just the traditional like chant it twice and you're done. I mean, it went on for a good 9-10 times. So like the whole stadium was getting into it. It brought some energy into the Stegman Coliseum for sure. So it was glad to be finally witness a good basketball game from the University of Georgia, because boy, those players deserve it. I tweeted last week. I was like, I know we hate on the program a lot, and it's warranted. That hate is warranted because Tom Crean has turned that roster into quite a mess. But at the same time, you just have to respect those kids, because every time I put them on my television or I'm there watching them, those kids never quit, and they never give up. I mean, you have 6 wins now, just got your first conference win of the year now into the season where it's kind of coming down to a close towards here in a few weeks. Those players continue to put their guts on the line, and they just continue to battle it out for the university. And on the bright side, like I was watching the bench also, and I think bench energy is a huge thing when it comes to playing basketball. I think it's a good indicator of how glued in or how locked in your team is and the state of your roster. Those guys were bringing the energy the whole game. They were cheering each other on. They were getting hyped up for their guys whenever they would make a good play or whatnot. And they were picking each other up. So I think that's also great to see. While Georgia basketball, of course, is still disappointing, those players are still locked in together, and they're still gelling together, and they're doing the best they can, and I respect the heck out of that, no doubt.
Yeah, they're doing the best they can with what they're being dealt at this point.
That's
all I'll say on that topic. But I think we've about covered what we came to cover.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Put in a good hour's worth.
Go ahead and plug the show.
Yep. So you got to follow us.
This is your job at this point.
It's my job. I'm the plug, I guess. So you got to follow us on Twitter. We have that down below, Dogs Daily Pod. Subscribe to us on YouTube if you guys are over there. Like the video as well. It helps us get up there on the algorithm of YouTube. Helps us produce our show or get our show out to more people so that they can watch it, catch us. Maybe they see if they like us, subscribe to us, get our numbers up. So please do all of that for answer my comment, coward. That's my roommate for anybody in the comments. Apparently he's getting quite feisty with us. But he said, discuss why baseball is a significantly better sport than basketball because the final 15 seconds last 30 minutes in a basketball game. For those that don't know, that was an argument that me and him had last night at the basketball game where he was complaining because there was timeouts every 5 seconds, because that's how basketball goes sometimes. But to argue that, I'll repeat what I told you. Your favorite sport takes the longest time to play. Baseball, by far and away, takes the longest to play out of any of them.
But it's consistent, though.
No, I'm not a baseball hater. I was just defending
Don't start that
sport.
argument with me. That's the wrong one to make with
Whatever.
me. Baseball is a great sport for one. Like, one of the things that I love the most about it is every single guy has to have their chance, right? Like, you can't do what you can in football where you can't do what you can in football where you can run the clock, right? Milk it out and just let the clock run and just and not even give the opponent a chance to do anything else, right? Especially not in NFL. You can win an NFL game by a coin toss and send a team home packing in the NFL, like in the playoffs, which is ridiculous. So that's one thing about football. And then you've got, basketball where you can foul each other. Like, you foul them out and all that stuff to make them go to the free throw line, slow the game down and change it. Where, hold on, they still at least have the chance to take the shot, but it kind of like it's a management thing that's different. Whereas in baseball, you have to throw 3 strikes to every batter, or they have to at least put it in play and swing at a bad pitch if you're going to throw a bad pitch.
I'd say a foul is almost equivalent. Like, fouling guys late in the game is equivalent to like intentionally walking a guy, avoiding that, and possibly like what you're trying to do is save time in basketball, and you're trying to avoid them hitting a 3-pointer and increasing their lead, and you're trying to save time for more possessions. Basketball's like, okay, whatever. I think I'm the most valuable source in this argument because I, for one, have played both of sports. I played both sports in high school.
Basketball, then baseball. Listen,
Morgan coming out with the truth, I guess. That kind of hurts That kind of hurts my heart because I played basketball in high school. So for her to say that she likes football more than basketball kind of pains me a little bit. But that's all right. But I think I should go back to what I was trying to do.
Go ahead.
After Dean rudely interrupted me. But yeah, follow us on Twitter, follow us on Facebook, Dogs Daily Pod. You can find us any of your podcast platform as well if you want to catch old episodes, anything like that. We got some good ones deep back from last year. So search us up on there. Follow us on Twitter. DM us those talking season comments that you guys find on Twitter, please. Just because we want content. We know you guys see them, and we know you guys get fired up about them. So if you want to see us talk about them, maybe clown the person on air. We're not going to drop any names, but we definitely will sure talk about it.
If it's a verified person, we say the name.
If they're not verified, they got a blue check mark, the hate is warranted toward them. But.
Yeah. Or if it's one of what's the Big Game Boomer page that always
Big Game Boomer.
That one we talk about all the time. I'm gonna call that one out
by
because every week he would post a new
list or whatever
list of something that was just egregious, like it was awful every time.
So if you want more content from us, if you guys want to keep track with us, just follow us on all our socials. Again, like that video, subscribe to us on YouTube as well, and then we'll catch you guys next week. We'll have another banger coming up. We got some big plans coming up for the NFL draft as well. Jeremiah putting that in the works right now. So stay tuned for that because we've got something special coming up for that, which is coming up in April. So stay tuned for that because it's going to be fun. We're going to have a lot of fun with it. I think you guys really like it as well. So.
Next episode will obviously be about National Signing Day and some other things mixed in there, but we'll have an official list of who has or has not signed at Georgia at that point. We'll have a complete 2022 class at that point. So we'll kind of be able to go over all of that as well. But as always, keep it classy in the Classic City. We will catch you guys next week.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Dogs Daily on Sports Illustrated. Take a second to subscribe, rate, review, and share with your friends and family. Feel free to reach out to the Dogs Daily crew on Twitter with any topics you'd like discussed. You can reach out to Jeremiah at Jeremiah_Stod7, to Kyle at DK Fubderberg, and Jonathan at 22_J-Man. Check back next week for a brand new episode. In the meantime, go